wherever you may be. So this will be recorded like all the other ones and posted in the Slack channel. So yes, I'll review, go back through them. If you're wondering, yes, I'm in a random hotel room somewhere in Chicago. But so if things go awry, just hang with us. We'll get them back going, but don't anticipate it. But it's famous last words. So yeah, so we'll just kind of wait here for 2 minutes. Just a reminder, if you have questions, you can put them, I'd prefer you put them in the Q&A. It's easier to kind of mark them answered. You can obviously banter in the chat. And then, but I prefer if you do the Q&A, then I'll make sure I go through each question at the end. We tend to get some pretty good questions come out of these, something I miss or some clarifications. And as always, you can always hit me up on Slack afterwards. Yeah, so we'll get this going. So give about another 60 seconds. We'll start this party, let some of the attendees pour in. We had pretty good registration for this one, so it's exciting. It's not every day we release new standards. So this is a good one.
You had 80 register.
What's that?
You had 80 register.
All right, good. So we can shake them. We'll wait give it a few minutes, let people pour in, or a few seconds, and they can catch up. Let's see if I can do this. Yes, there's in a tiny baby room in Chicago, they give you this real creepy curtain. Not quite sure what it's for. I guess if you'd like to use the pull out on the left 6 feet of my room and the bed on the right 6 feet of my room, then you could just make both happen. But yeah, it's pretty creepy. But like I said, it's the finest hotel you can get for $150 in Chicago. So you get what you pay for, I guess. All right, let's start this party here. See if I can get this screen share on my laptop here. Share screen. All right, let's try this. Then, all right, Jessica, can you see me or see my screen?
Yes.
All right, sweet. All right, boom, we did it. All right, here we are in hot, sunny Chicago, road tripping it from the Buffalo and hitting up ASI Chicago for a few days here. But what we're here for today is a new standards release. It is the order shipment notification. This is a members only education session. So the cool part is one of the benefits of membership is you get early releases and early access to standards. That is what this is. This is a early release for members before it goes out to a wider, broader community, but we won't give members a few months head start run at this. Likely we'll publicly release this after or at our event in Tampa, which I'll talk about in a second here, but so consider yourself, 2 month, 3 month head start. All right, so as many of you know, this is part of our monthly education session series. We try to do the third Tuesday of every month at 2 Eastern, 1 Central. So I'm John Norris, education work group leader. I think this is number 7 of these things so far. So we're sticking to it every month. We'll be back next month. So I'm just going to keep chugging away. Real quick, the Promo Standards mission, obviously Promo Standards is a 501c6, an official nonprofit registered with the old government. So we collaborate to create industry leading open standards that enable industry participants to improve customer experience, reduce transactional friction, and effectively execute their digital strategy. So I'd say the OSN service is really part of the improving customer experience. Obviously, there's reducing transactional friction. That you get a lot of that with PO and invoice, but say this is one of those services. When I say OSN, so if you're new to promo standards or order shipment notification, I probably won't say order shipment notification anymore. I'll just refer to it as OSN. But here we are. So this is one of those core services that we have high adoption rates. So it's always a fine line when we make an improvement or change to make sure that it's really worth it and that we're not just changing things to change things. So hopefully by the end of this session today, you're convinced that we're changing things for all the right reasons. I think we are. All right, real quick. Promo Standards Tech Summit and Hackathon is a little under 3 months away. It's going to be an awesome time. We have some, great things stacked up for both the hackathon and the technology summit. So if you haven't registered, go to the promostandards.org homepage, right off the events page, right off the home screen. Make sure you register all your peeps. We're very consciously making this a event that will be both relevant for developers, technology leaders, BAs, anybody in your tech team, and any of those technologists in your organization that cross over to the leadership side. So this will be a very broad but opportunistic education session or education event that we're trying to make sure we have the tracks and the right people there to add value at all levels of the technology spectrum. So real quick, if you've been to any of our events in the past, they're fun. We're going to hammer down education, but at the same time, we're going to have a lot of time for collaboration, a lot of, communicating with your peers. I meet more people this way than, any other event throughout the year. One of the big themes we're going to hit this year is digital transformation. Seems to be all the hot topic right now. So that's going to be a big one. We'll go from there. I just want to shout out, we do have 2 epic sponsors for our event. They're our main sponsors. So both Distributor Central and Essent have stepped up, and they're some of the main sponsors for this event. So we want to thank both of them. One thing, I keep getting questions. Right now on the website, we had a loose agenda with just some holes in it. And just in the past few days, we have a sizable work group that has been working out the details of this agenda. So it's real quick, if you're curious what's going to happen for the Technology Summit agenda, it's really kicking off the keynote speaker on executing digital transformation. And then we hop right into breakout sessions. So our breakout sessions, we're trying to have a promo standards centric track for one of the breakout sessions, and then a very industry relevant tech track. So that's where we split into a technology supporting a hybrid workforce, and on the other side, we're going to stack up a bunch of promo standards integration case studies. So get into the real weeds of success stories and implementation guides and best practices along the way. Then we're going to kind of come back together. I'm really excited. So Catherine Graham's going to lead a session on the digital transformation on the factory floor. I think that's this topic never gets touched on in any industry events, but there's a lot of automation, a lot of cool technologies that are taking place around the industry. So this will be a panel of both operations leaders and technology leaders in the industry that kind of hone in on what are those cool things that are happening on the factory floors in the promotional products industry. That's cool. One of the popular events from things in the past, technology roundtables. Steve Stanley is going to lead this up. This is where we're going to be able to get into deep dive, really technical topics or broad industry relevant topics as well. So we'll go back into breakout sessions. Everybody loves integrations in your ERP. So we'll have a little fun industry ERP talk. And on the flip side of that, we'll talk the more technical promo standards track will be designing your stack to scale using, a lot of people who run and do promo standards quickly run into the fact that there are lots of transactions taking place. So that's that. Obviously, you guys can read a lot of this, but best practices, we're going to hit up heavily on the promo standards track. And then Raj, which I left this off, Raj is going to head up a data science and data analysis session, which will be a breakout. And then we'll wrap it up with my worst day in tech. So next day we kick it off, heavy security. It's kind of a big deal. Then Eric Schoenbarger is going to do the exclusive launch and walkthrough of the Promo Standards Order Management Service. That will be the only release of it in 2022. So it'll be an exclusive to this event launch. So that'd be kind of a big deal. And then we'll wrap the whole thing up by a kind of an open discussion panel with some tech leaders of the industry, talking about what are the existing pain points in the industry and how we as promo standards and technologists can work to solve those. So kind of ended on a collaborative high note, but we're pretty excited for this agenda here. I think it's, hitting a lot of topics that haven't been hit before, and it'll be a good time. So go register if you haven't. Get your peeps from your tech team, register as well. Like I said, huge networking event. It's a good time. So let's get after it. All right. OSN 2.0, here we are. So we always talk about this kind of promo standards cycle of standards that are out there. And there's always been the big three: inventory, order status, and order shipment notifications. So as you see, we've, revved inventory because it had massive, I guess, I don't want to call them flaws, but areas for improvements. We created 2.0. There was a product data 2.0 because there was a huge demand there. Order status 2.0 is kind of morphing into the order management service. So that's a thing. And then obviously OSN 2.0, today we're really going to get into the why. Why are we doing this and what are the improvements? Because I think it's important to focus on. So that's where this guy lives. Obviously, OSN 1.0 is very, very widely adopted. So we're going to make an effective push in ROI and reasons and justifications of why it's important that we think you should be, or who should be supporting 2.0 and why everybody should be. So for those of you who are newer to promo standards or not overly familiar, so promo standards has a very well-defined standard development process. And one of the most important pieces of that is what we call the RFS, which is a request for standard. So any advisory member, board member, standards committee member any given time can present to the board a request for standard. So basically what that is, you have to fill out certain aspects of, what's the purpose, what's the goals, what are the, how do we know if this is successful? So I just want to walk through that process here with OSN 2.0. So way back when, pre-pandemic, Dustin from Staples, he was on the standards committee. He wrote and submitted a RFS to Rev Order Shipment Notifications 2.0. So one of the biggest pieces of that is, what's the purpose? And we're going to go through this, and I think it's important here so people just don't think we willy-nilly change standards or just haphazardly go at it. I think this is important. The timeline here obviously got jacked big time because of pandemic, but these things do take time. There's some approval processes, there's some flushing it out. So these things are not just banged out overnight and then put live. So there's a pretty lofty testing process that goes along with this. But the purpose of this standard, as Dustin had requested, was to update the existing order shipment notification to better align with the PO standard and capabilities based on feedback over the years. That was the biggest hole, is that there was a gap between OSN 1.0 and the PO spec, right? There weren't the links between part IDs, line items. It was tough to make that leap. Yes, OSN 1.0 had products, but it did not have that tie back to the PO standard. So that was what this was set to solve. Then one of the big chunks and pieces of this, I'll kind of let you read this, I'll paraphrase, but there's some background information that's required in the RFS. So, it just kind of goes through kind of exactly what I just said. The PO line numbers were a string, but PO standard were an integer. So that speaks back to there was inconsistencies because PO came out after OSN, and we figured this was a good time to swing back through and tie them up and tidy up and bring OSN up to standard. So one of the most important things is this is what the standards committee takes these requirements and then pretty much uses them as their marching order when developing the newest standards that we create. So these are very much, at the end of the review process, we go through and check off to make sure if each of these requirements have been made, these have all been approved by the organization. This is how we go. So the requirements for this one, the standards should be updated better on a PO standard, should be better clarify what is being shipped. That was kind of there were some gray areas, and the product to box quantities and line numbers that we want to tighten up. Standard shall be updated to better clarify how an order is being shipped. There was some ambiguity there on the kind of, there was way too many strings, way too much room for interpretation. Things were getting smashed in the same field, so we cleaned that up. Updates should be implemented using promo standards best practices. This is a whole thing. You'll see obviously the address object that we've used in every single standard since PO has been reused here. So we're trying to keep all those consistencies in place. And then the last thing was to keep it a pool architecture, which I'm sure somebody will put in the comments their opinions on it. But that was just one of the pieces that we felt was successful in the first round, and we wanted to continue that. And then this is the last piece of the RFS for us, and it's very important because basically, how will we know if this is a success, right? At the end of the day, this is, part of our process for checking all the boxes and ensuring we're doing this for the right reasons. So the standard will be successful if you can improve distributor service provider alignment of the POs submitted to their shipping notifications, as well as providing more granular details to distributor service providers regarding what is being shipped. So that's our definition of success. Hopefully we hit the mark here. All right, real quick, give a quick shout out. These things just don't author themselves. This picture on the left is the standard committee's most recent meeting in Florida. You kind of see the second from the left, the guy in the white shirt over there, that's Steve. Steve really took this one and ran with it after Dustin's RFS. So Steve's the vice president over at Essent Corp, and he, with the input of the standards committee, kind of scrutinizing his work, took the lead and authored this. And there was probably 10 rounds of revisions and modifications that went through this through testing. So shout out to Steve from Essent. He really did a home run here and grabbed this one by the horns. So having said that, all right. Biggest thing at the very, I want to kind of show some of the differences between 2.0 and 1.0, because we didn't want to blow up the world and just have everybody redo things. I would say a lot of the data is very consistent in 2.0 with 1.0. The difference is probably a cleaner structure and better defined standard and better defined descriptions and just general better written. I mean, it was 5 years since the first one came out, or 6 years now, so a lot's happened since then. Cool part is, if you look left and right, you'll realize we didn't jack with the request. So the request is going to be the exact same as 1.0. What you will notice is the descriptions have become more useful. It's no longer, this was very early on. So you'll see Steve went through, cleaned up, added some short names for the query types, and then did a little bit better description of spelling them out. So this is one of the one things you'll see that really did not get changed. So good news, we'll start there. All right, so this kind of worked with purchase order. So we're gonna run through this structure the same way we did with the PO spec. So on the left, and where it'll pan out. So we'll have a picture of an XML. This is a clip from an order I pulled from our OSN 2.0 at service at Starline. And on the right, I'll kind of loosely describe it for those who are more visual learners, loosely describe the structure as if I were to just draw it out in bubbles and scribble it on a piece of paper. So I'll walk through the right first, and then you can pretty much follow along through the XML. Notice a lot of it's been condensed. You see the plus signs in my Notepad++ have been squashed to condense some of the different data in the arrays. So general structure, a million miles back, is we have a purchase order, right? And in our industry, which I think this is why one of the key points of why it's important that we make industry specific POs. I think we as consumers, publishers, and just general promo people live this data in a different way that the outside world doesn't necessarily work their orders this way. So what happens in our world is, let's take, for example, Halo. Halo submits Starline a purchase order. That purchase order, unbeknownst to them, many times is split into multiple internal sales orders. Now, most people don't always care about those sales orders. Some people will say that's a supplier specific. That's my problem as a supplier. I just care about my purchase orders. sometimes you are going to care about those sales orders because that determines if I'm shipping partials, if I'm moving pieces around, producing them in different facilities, shipping them from different geographic locations. I'm probably doing that and tying some sort of sales order to it. So if you're new to promo standards, that's the concept. We've carried this through multiple standards, but the concept is the distributor, customer, whoever sends the supplier, service provider, whatever you want to call them, a purchase order that could get split. I would say many times in our industry, it's a 1-to-1, where one purchase order gets one sales order. But that's basically a sales order in the supplier world is my internal order number. The purchase order carries the PO number from the distributor. So it's 1-to-many, most of the time 1-to-1. So then obviously sales orders now all contain this next grouping of information. One of the things I want to call out is those little yellow circles you see there. The yellow circles are those shipped in full flags. In the past, that was called complete. In OSN 1.0, you saw there was 3 different completes, and then you had to have the right logic to roll them up. We figured the terminology shipped in full was better than complete because we always got the questions, what does complete mean? Is it complete in terms of being printed and not shipped? If this line item is complete, but the other ones aren't, and it was just very confusing. So we renamed the logic there. Hopefully it makes a little bit better sense to the consumer. But that's what those little yellow flags are for. So the locations, sales orders, and purchase orders all have shipped in full flags on them in the data. And we'll go through each of these pieces all together. But I'm just trying to explain the overall structure. So essentially, purchase orders have sales orders. Sales orders have shipments. Now, shipments are defined by unique locations, right? Or location, yes, by unique locations. So that's that whole piece where they're shipped to, shipped from, all that information goes there. Now, shipment locations have packages, and then you can have one or many packages, and those one or many packages can contain products, and those products contain some sort of quantities of things. So that's the general relationship of OSM and the structure. Obviously, there's a lot more details, and we're going to go through it all. So on the left is the XML equivalent of what you see on the right. Obviously, I've compressed the packages array so that way you don't see the products and the items down at the bottom. But if you're curious, big picture, purchase orders have sales orders have shipment locations have packages, and packages have products. That's the context in which we're going to roll through this today here. All right, let's kind of hammer through some of these things. One thing is, as we get towards the end here, Jessica's going to post a bunch of links. And the links are to all this information that I'm spewing out here. So you'll be able to download it, go through it all yourself, and kind of dissect it and do the comparisons yourself. But we'll get to that in a minute. So this top level here, right, back to this guy. So we're going to take these 4 blue circles, ovals, ellipses, I guess, technically, for those of you who are keeping track. We'll take the 4 blue ellipses, and then I want to dissect each one of them individually. So back to that whole concept of purchase orders, what does that look like? It's just basically the OSN service can return one or many purchase orders, right? The query type 1 is by purchase order, query type 2 is by sales order, query type 3 is by date range or date, beginning date. So obviously, beginning date returns a very large amount of purchase orders. So the concept there is, I would say, this supports the 1 PO returned at once or the 1,000 POs returned at once. Just general guidance, don't put a date in so far away. I tend to see the most practical use case for date parameter querying. A lot of large distributors will pull only hour for every hour plus a little bit of extra time jitter in there, and then do a cleanup at the end of the day for the entire day. Other groups will just pull the entire most previous day because it's the date changed. So don't pull 30 days at a time and try to do a comparison yourselves. I think regular intervals seems to be popular. It seems really there's a whole group of people that pull, from 8 to 8, and then somewhere overnight they'll do a cleanup pull and pull for 24 hours and see if they missed anything. but I think that's a good general best practice that seems to work successfully for some of the largest firms that are consuming. But I digress. So, this is very simple, right? So order shipment notification object, there's, that flag shipped in full. You can read the descriptions. I'm not going to read this to you. You can go back to it on the recording. Back to that relationship, purchase orders have sales orders. Cool. Did it. That's what it looks like in XML. Nothing overly, I guess, of note there. One thing, oh my goodness, look what we did. This is one of the first iterations where we paid heavy attention to the required field. So many distributors and consumers of this data have always had, I will call it, constructive feedback that there needs to be more required fields. So you'll see a conscious effort to requiring more data that makes the request complete and more usable. So this is an example. The first place I noticed it where on these two objects, these two, now granted some of the objects have to be, but you will see this consistent as we go through. Obviously not everything is required because we realize not everybody has all the data, but we going forward are putting in more conscious effort on requiring data, requiring fields, leaving less ambiguity to the interpretation of the standards. One of the other things just of note, Steve's much better at defining descriptions, so you'll see a lot more thoughtful descriptions as we go through. Coolio. Okay, so let's hop over this. So obviously the next thing was, remember, there was purchase orders have sales orders have shipments. So what is this whole purchase orders have shipments? Essentially it's the ship to address and the ship from address. So what makes a shipment / location unique? It's the fact that it's shipping from somewhere. One of the pieces we put into place here is and this isn't optional, is the shipment destination type. That's the concept. Is it a commercial or residential address? I would say probably since the pandemic 2020, the concept of residential surcharges, shipment to residences are up significantly in the industry. So this piece was put into place because a lot of people who are post-rating shipment data, if they're going to do it through the OSN, need to know what that shipment destination type is. It also it helps for rating, prevents the consumer to have to re-blast that address back through validation and check their own system to see if it's a residential versus commercial. But that's the purpose of that field. We realize that not everybody has that data, but it's one of those things, if you have it, kick it in, it's good to go. You'll see that address object carried over that I mentioned earlier. That's fine. The concept of customer pickup, right? Those of you who do business, a decent amount of business in Canada, you'll realize that Canada has a high rate of customer pickups, just the nature of the beast, probably because a lot of the business is done in the GTA. But the Sanmars, Alphas, SNSs, the apparel providers also have a fairly high amount of local customer pickups at their DCs. So that's a very usable field that we've carried through from the previous versions. And then the flag, the shipped in full, right, was this whole destination, aka address fulfilled. So that's that. It's nothing overly complex, but just kind of pointing out the new pieces of data that have been smashed into there. All right, so we move on. All right, so back to my tree, we're down to packages, right? Locations have packages. Packages have freight dimensions and they have details. So there's a lot going on here on the right, but when you get down to it on the left, it's really not as much. So this is the whole concept of what are the packages, aka tracking numbers, that went to each address. So back here on this last page, we have, so what you see down here on line 39 of my Notepad++, that's the package array that lives in the shipment array. So this is what are the packages that went to this particular address, the ship from, ship to combination of address. So it could be 1 to a billion packages. Now there's a debate, which we'll get into in a second, about the number of, do you need the lead tracking number versus all of them? And we'll kind of talk about that as we go forward here. So what are the properties that we have here? You can obviously read a lot of this, but in general, what you see is the structure that we talked about earlier. We pulled out dimension units of measure, the concept of units of measure being standardized and enumerated. That came along from some of the more previous standards that we created. But I see you get a much better structure. So you get a tracking number, you get a shipment date, you get DIMs and the unit of measure for those DIMs. We added in the concept of dimensional weight. If you don't know what dimensional weight is, you probably don't care about it. If you do know what it is, it's probably because you're rating your own packages outside of the data that you're getting. So just a quick shipping, today I learned about shipping. Dimensional weight, obviously the carriers want to ship an ideal size package that weighs an ideal amount, so they're not shipping air. They charge pretty much per weight, saying that the average length times width times height should be divided by 168, and if the number is less than that, then they will round up and use the dimensional weight and kind of penalize you for shipping less dense boxes. So the concept of dimensional weight is how they do that. Not always relevant. Sometimes it is. If you're rating these things, dimensions, weight, all that stuff comes into play down the road. So probably not a big deal, but the concept's in there. One of the other things, freight details, we split out carrier and service. That was kind of an important piece because, there was the realization that, those two things do not belong in the same field. Lastly, in the packaging array, we added is this optional? No, it is required. Pre-production proof. We realized what is happening, and this is another industry specific example. Take many large orders in this industry, or many orders just across the board. There will be an order for 1,000 units of a tumbler, and there will be line item 1 that says 1,000, and then line item 2 that says that's a one piece. Send it to the end buyer, send it to the distributor, the sales rep, so they can see the physical piece before the balance ships. So there's a lot of splitting of pre-production proofs, pre-production samples that is also supported in the purchase order. There's a concept of each line item can be identified as a pre-production proof. So that's the concept there, is that value can either be yes, no, or unknown. For some reason, we put it as unknown, but it's really no. But not rocket science here. It's packages have dimensions, dimensions have weights, packages and tracking numbers go to specific carriers, specific services, and we flag it if it's a pre-production proof. Like I said, not rocket science. It's a lot less ominous on the left than it is on the right. So good to go there. Continue. All right, the last piece, and this is probably where we had the more significant changes. What you'll see on the left is this is where we determine what products are within each package. And we're going to talk about, there's some guidance in the spec about what if you don't know that information. But one of the big pieces here is the addition of that fifth field down on the left, purchase order line number. Distributors that care about line numbers very much care about this piece of data. Why? There are many people who are using the OSN service to populate a quantity shipped from the supplier. Now, is this the best place for that? Maybe not, but it's a very viable use case of how, for the concept of overs and unders and exact quantities in this industry is a nightmare. So there are many distributors are using the OSN service to do that. The problem with that was they couldn't tie it back to a specific line number. This is really rears its head on apparel, where there's, all the sizes. It's kind of, how many extra large whites did you ship? How many, small blues did you ship? Those are all different line items, and not being able to tie that back here was somewhat of a deficiency. Now, I could argue that this is not the place to do that, and probably many would, but I'm not going to tell people how to run their business if they think they can get the right data. So we just happen to make it a little bit easier for them. One thing we also did is, so we added in the part ID, which, so remember, this lives under the package. So the concept here is what is in this package. Right, so this box contains 5 extra large and 6 larges. The next box contains 12 mediums and 13 smalls. Some of you are probably scratching your heads like, well, hell, I don't have that data. And at Starline, we didn't and don't always have that data. So we're gonna get to what to do that in the next slide here. But the whole piece here is a structured quantity, units of measure, PO line number, part, and product per box, package, whatever the heck you want to call it. So that's the Rhino there. That's stuff on the left. Not that bad. So real quick, we went through the whole thing, top to bottom: purchase orders, sales orders, shipment locations, packages, items. Some would argue that products could be up above packages, but I think it's in the right spot where it's at today. Real quick, Jessica is going to paste in the chat, if she hasn't already, she's going to put in 4 different links. She's going to put in a link to the validator. So for those of you who don't know, Promo Standards has a data validator where you can post in an endpoint, alter the request parameters, and test the response bodies. So OSN 2.0 is in the validator. It's live right now. Jessica also is going to paste in both Starlines and HIT's OSN 2.0 endpoints if you'd like to test and play around with them and get some test data. You can do that and see what the differences in the response are. And then she's also going to post a link to download the XSDs, the documentation, all the fun stuff, the WSDL, everything for this standard. So you'll be seeing that come through in the chat here shortly. For those of you who are rewatching on YouTube, I am sorry. Okay, remember I said that before. What if I don't have the data to know what's in each box? And not everybody does, and not everybody does in each scenario. But in this case, fortunately, I think this is where Promo Standards is maturing and getting better. We're providing the realization that not all these are not perfect scenarios. So we're trying to provide guidance ahead of time in the actual documentation. So one of the pieces of guidance in the documentation is if you're unable to determine the quantity of items shipped by tracking number for a shipment due to system limitations. So the key is like, look, there's 12 boxes. I don't know what's in each box. Some of them are white mugs and some of them are red mugs, but I don't know by tracking number, right? That's a realistic scenario. So the guidance there is if you don't know, attach it all to the first, to a single tracking number and leave the other tracking numbers without products or quantities. So the concept of, there's a lead tracking number now for every shipment. You don't always know what the lead tracking number is, but all the tracking numbers will track the same. Puke in all the item, product, line details at the top level, and then include the subsequent tracking numbers, just leave them blank for product data. So these are the things that in the past, we would have just left it up to the community to do that. Now, what we don't want you to do, if you don't know what's in each package, don't duplicate the data for every single tracking number. If you shipped 48 mugs across 4 boxes, don't put 48 in each tracking number. If you know the details, you can put 12, 12, 12, and 12. If you don't know the details, puke the whole 48 into the first tracking number and then just send the rest along. That's that. So some quick takeaways on OSN, kind of what I saw as we went through. So the biggest thing, standardizes the structure to follow the other services in the PO spec. That was the main goal, tying that line number back, product IDs, part IDs, making sure the whole thing adds up. Uses more required fields, trying to get away from the wild, wild west of ambiguity where people can do as they see, trying to rein that in and where applicable and not overly burdening the supplier and distributor and service provider community, require more data. More detailed field descriptions. This is all in Steve. Steve has much more, a better articulator of descriptions. Shout out to him. Not a huge data jump. This was the thing, right? you already probably, minus some of the what's in each box by line number, have the data. This was more of a structure and realignment of the data to match other standards. Easier to identify products and parts that are contained in the package, right? That concept didn't exist before. Clarity on how a product is being shipped, carrying service fields are now separate. Larger, and you'll see this at the end of the documentation once you download it from what Jessica's put in there. Larger set of enumerated values, which makes consumption cleaner and more functional, right? The more we can enumerate, the less random free text fields there are, the more usable this data is for the consumer. And that's where we're obviously, the end goal is to tighten up all of these standards to ensure that there is a uniform adoption and there's not a kind of 100 implementations out there. And the last one is just jam it in there. It's still a full service. So we did it. OSN 2.0. If you have any questions, throw them in the Q&A. Real quick, what are we doing here? These are the education sessions we've done already. One thing is, if you go back and you start to look at these different standards, if you want to go through the YouTube channel or just hit up Jessica, she's the admin, Promo Standards admin, you can always hit her up for, hey, do you have the link for configured purchase orders? Do you have the link for what the service providers are doing? This, when you get to implement or OSN 2.0, probably if you just watch 5 minutes of this presentation, fast forward to the parts you want to know about, if you have any questions, it's a good place to start. So next month, we're going to hit on authentication best practices. It's probably a shorter, lighter topic. Concept there is, there's a lot of people out there, service providers, distributors, suppliers that are tackling authentication in different routes. We might try to open this up so it's not just me barking at the camera for 45 minutes next time, and try to get different voices on here of what they're doing that works. Because I think the more we can streamline authentication, the higher adoption rates will be, right? A lot of times there's just people request credentials into the unknown. So handle that. And then right now we don't have anything slated for September because bang, bang, beginning of October is our technology summit. So we're gonna do the giant order management service release by Eric and the standards committee. So having said that, that's that. I'm going to see if there's any Q&A. I saw some stuff brewing in the chat. So that's Jessica. So Jessica did put the links in there. So that's cool. She put some information about if you want to become a sponsor of the Tech Summit, which I would encourage you to do that. And there are no questions. All right, see, it was so easy. So we did it. That's it for today. Thank you, everybody. If you have questions, continue the conversation over to Slack. Hit me up, hit up anybody on the standards committee. You can always ask Steve for clarification, as he was the author of this. Anybody on the standards committee, they'll be able to help you out. So live from sunny Chicago, we did it. Thanks, everybody. Peace out.